2, 1.
Okay. Okay, in the second part, I will be reading 3 poems and a video to top it off, as I said before, for the International Poetry Festival in Milan past May during the lockdown. So again, the similar structure to the first round, I will be doing a shortish poem, a longish poem, and a shortish poem. Okay. This first one goes as follows. It's the ending actually to the book that I finished the first round with, Billy Goat. Okay. This is actually inspired a bit. I have here next to the poem after Marc Chagall, a wonderful, of course, favorite of mine. It's called A Lesson in Hiking. I would often bleat back stuff to keep the others abreast as to what I made of such and such a tree. The beauty mix of nuts, M&Ms, and Jesus rays beaming through the endless riddle of blue and green. How one squirrel would make daredevil leaps between distant branches, about how scary the ravine to our left. I know this is simply a lesson in hiking, but when the top of the trail is reached and I'm oohing and awing at the embers of this vanishing world, crisscrossed by the sword gashes of planes losing their point, the boy in the circus takes his perilous leap and admits to still harboring the hope that mom and dad will catch me. There you are, on the edge of your own cliff, the stubborn final smoke of an otherwise innocent forest fire coming out of you like a little chimney, tinkering with your own satchel of poems and mystery. And when the light's just right between us, something suddenly makes me want to stay. Turnips, a handful popping out of barren ground, purple and hard, and I take to the evening sky a billy goat we've seen before, above a brief yet undeniable sketch of home. This next poem, I will screen share. In this book, Mountain on Jupiter, Earth Castle, it's actually a double thing. It's 2 volumes in one book. The first poem in this one, in this block, is from A Mountain on Jupiter, and then it will be followed by 1 poem in Earth Castle. In A Mountain on Jupiter, there is a series of poems that are called Meditation on Art and Artists. And this particular one is about Victor Fleming. Meditation on Art and Artists, Victor Fleming. I'd like to explain a few things to myself in the back seat of my parents' station wagon at a drive-in movie theater in 1969, the night they took us to see The Wizard of Oz. First of all, the Wicked Witch of the West is an actress with green paint on her face. In Munchkinland, if you look closely, it's a trap door that opens, billowing out the orange smoke that she first appears from and then later goes down into, just before the blast of fire. Second, her monkeys don't really fly. They're little dwarf actors dressed up as monkeys and have very fine cables you can barely see that toss them about as if they were actually flying. Thirdly, when Dorothy finally throws water onto the witch and her burning broomstick that the Wizard of Oz declared would help him to grant Dorothy's wish to get back home, the witch doesn't really melt, but rather slowly descends into another trap door. In fact, if you look closely, her black dress is cleverly stuck to the stone castle floor, allowing for the inflated puffing up of a dress, which just might occur if indeed the body wearing it were to melt, and B, covering precisely what they needed to cover, namely the trap door. And while I'm at it, back in the black and white beginning, she is the same actress who plays Mrs. Gulch, which explains how when Mrs. Gulch is cycling by the window in the tornado, she suddenly transforms into a witch flying on a broomstick. A trick that filmmakers learned way back in the earliest days of filmmaking. See The Voyage to the Moon, George Méliès, 1902. Surprise the eye with the meshing of two different juxtaposed images, giving the sensation that a truly magical metamorphosis is taking place. However, regarding the tornado scene, there is something that I am afraid I won't be able to explain. Here in the future, there's a thing called the internet, which is like an emerald city, where every citizen has a crystal ball in their bungalow, where you can find apparent answers to nearly everything and every wish you may have. Such as, on her struggle back home, when Dorothy reaches her home picket fence gate, it turns out the stables we see in the distance were only 3 feet high. The cornfields we see alongside were only 3 inches high, all strategically placed close to the foreground, creating, as laws of perspective and the vanishing point go, the sensation of great depth. The twister, in turn, was a 35-foot muslin sock that they had filmed at arduous and lengthy takes, introducing wind down into the winding shaft of material. Stagehands, it goes on to explain, would introduce dust, dried leaves, and different debris into giant wind machines, while the best take of the muslin sock was projected on a translucent screen at the back of the MGM soundstage. And despite all the technical breakdown the Emerald City may afford in deconstructing certain fears and magic my childhood in America was subject to, I'm still afraid I'm incapable of explaining something to myself in the back seat of my parents' station wagon at the drive-in movie theater in 1969, the night they took us to see The Wizard of Oz. The most mysterious 17 seconds of the entire movie. You can clock them on YouTube. Contrary to the popular consensus about other supposedly enigmatic historical scenes. My apologies to myself, and my apologies to my sister. Sitting next to me in the back seat, for not being able to explain how one day we ourselves might be driving and the person next to us gets blown out of the window. As quick as that. They start the second her tugging hand fails to open the bolted tornado shelter door. Gale force solitude slapping her in the face and doubling her body over, her right arm wrenched back a split second like a wishbone nearly snapping in two. A last deafened futile kick and the family doesn't hear. and the surrendering to the onslaught of imminent oblivion retreats back into the flimsy confines of the only four walls remaining on the face of the earth. Home. Alone in the universe with Toto in her arms. The only other beating heart around. Incapable of explaining anything either. And the 17 seconds end. Don't they always? Your world at the mercy of a window blown off your bedroom wall. At the mercy of real trapdoors springing up like hungry crocodiles. Your best supporting actor doesn't necessarily wrestle free from. Happily jogging by and waving in the twister, his sweatsuit suddenly bursting into a burning hospital gown, and the bucket full of chemotherapy that doesn't necessarily do the trick. The body going down in waves of evil monkeys and morphine, superimposed images of chaos and clarity, of life and death, like a truly magical metamorphosis were taking place. Unaware you are about to open another door to something unexpectedly beautiful he left unlocked at the back of his eyes. And I will finish with one of the last poems from the second collection called Earth Castle. Yet again, time and distance in different ways. This is something that I occasionally come across where I see like 3 different elements, and then I search to find a way to make them work together. This is like based on true life. These are 3 elements that I did see in a given newspaper, okay, on a given day. I swear to God. Okay, here we go. So this is called, from Earth Castle, it is called Science, Technology, and Culture. The news today speaks of bumblebees disappearing from Spain, France, and Italy. The news explains how they, in their endeavor to seek nectar, exchange pollen between the female and male parts of the tomato flower. The lack of pollination, it says, will result in a collapse of vegetable reproduction. The news today speaks of new horizons, how the space probe launched in 2006, back when Pluto was still considered a planet, is to reach its destination on Tuesday, having traveled nearly a decade to get there. The news mentions the discovery of dry rivers on the surface of Mars, the subterranean ocean on Jupiter's moon, Europa, the geysers on Neptune's satellite, Triton, and how new horizons may find similar traces of water on Pluto. In 1963, the news says, yet another film made during the Franco regime had barely squeaked through official censorship. Its premiere limited, however, to one movie theater in Bilbao 2 years later. The World Continues, in the style of Italian neo-realism, speaks of families destroyed in a city, of a collective moral misery, of prostitution, abortion, the hypocrisy of honor. It is to be shown in a dozen movie theaters this summer. A still from The World Continues shows a young man, a woman, and presumably the mother of one or the other, all 3 smiling against a leafy background. presumably green. A simulation of a gold-plated new horizons with a couple of planets in its wake. Our burning sun, bright in the distance. And the furry, black and white, black and yellow, common bumblebee in its endeavor to seek nectar here on a purple flower. And I'm going to screen share one more time for the video, okay? As I said before, this video was done recently during the lockdown for the International Festival of Poetry in Milan. And perhaps it is the ultimate time and distance because I dedicate this particular poem to myself in the future when I am no longer here. 1 second. Oops, 1 second. Burn me to a future song, the story of which will speak of me unknowingly as my body goes. It could be one of dance I never had the chance to know, alone with eyes closed, barefoot to wooden floor on fire. The Rocky Mountains, the Pyrenees, the greater Caucasian bodies I couldn't ignore. I will burn up that dance floor. Burn me to a future melody which never pursued me in my daily hurry, my focus on the here and now, the occasional worry for tomorrow, melancholy for past sorrow, my belly to the sun and my butt to the moon. As it goes, as long as it is marrow's desire, consummation of fire, burn me to a future song. Ta-da! That's it. Thank you, everybody.